every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Let the games begin. Good morning, Amy Jacobson here. Bruce Wolf.
Good morning.
And for Dan Proft. He's on the base. Dun, 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 dun. The court battle against President Trump's national emergency declaration has begun, Bruce. 16 states, including Illinois, trying to stop Trump's national emergency funding from going through. Leading the charge is the Attorney General from the state of California.
Well, it's pretty clear that the president is trying to usurp Congress's authority. The president does not have the power of the purse. President can't decide to shuffle money around once Congress has allocated it. That's only for Congress to do. Otherwise, presidents for the last 240 years would have been doing the same thing when they don't like where Congress puts the money. Simply because Donald Trump fabricated a crisis and called it a national emergency doesn't mean that he can violate the separation of powers under the Constitution.
Where was your lawsuit against Obama when he used the pen and the phone? Answer me that, Mr. Attorney General.
You know, he knows the legal hurdles ahead, and he said so, that he's trading a battle in Congress for one in the courts.
Emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
And so on.
Sounded
and
like
so
my
on.
rabbi's sermon on Saturday.
But President Trump did say something in the Rose Garden on Friday that made people think, oh, this really isn't an emergency. He took the urgency, Bruce, out of the emergency. Listen to this soundbite. It's been 24 hours in the making.
On the wall, they skimped. So I was successful in that sense, but I want to do it faster. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster.
That's the thing. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster.
Strike that. Strike that.
With more on this, let's welcome back to the program Freddy Gray, deputy editor of The Spectator, former literary editor of The American Conservative. Good morning, Mr. Gray. How are you?
Good morning. Very well indeed. How are you guys?
Good. So do you think President Trump is acting beyond his authority here?
I think constitutionally, particularly when he admits that it's not an emergency, he's stretching the definition of emergency, to put it mildly. But I mean, the problem with the whole idea of the executive in America is that it has been, emergency measures have been stretched and misused all the time. So in a sense, Trump's just doing what people before him have done, leaders before him have done.
I think the argument is joined over whether this is a military operation or not, the building of the wall, because you're entitled to do things, with the military, but the wall is essentially a civilian edifice, and it really stretches credulity, don't you think, to call it a military one?
Well, I think Trump's always liked the idea of calling in the military. I think that sort of appeals to his sense of himself as a man of action. I think the whole thing is stretching credulity to a certain extent. I think he's going to win the argument. I think, as he said, it's going to be a very boring legal fight. And he's going to be making the same point over and over again. And I think in terms of public opinion, I mean, this is more sort of hunch than polling, because the polling is ambiguous. But in terms of public opinion, I think he's making the right call. He's making the right bet.
I'm not sure about that because, he's
making the right call, but where is he going to get the funding from? Because that's the larger issue. Is he going to take it from the military? Is he going to take it from the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, but the thing is that he's got his base. I mean, he's got to worry about his base because as Ann Coulter goes, so goes his base. So he does have to worry about that. But actually, the public isn't all that hot about building the wall. I think the public's wrong about it, but they're not all that hot about it.
What, 254 miles in place?
I'm starting to wonder, does he really need his base on this as much as people say? Because, I mean, where's the base going to go?
Not vote. They'll stay home.
They're going to be voting for Trump.
They'll vote for Bernie. I don't know if you heard it. He just
announced that he's running for a second time for president. But do you think if President Trump's base, I just don't think they're going to stay home over this, Bruce. I have to, once you're a Trump supporter, you're a Trump supporter for life. That's how I feel. Do you agree, Freddie Gray?
Yes, I agree. And it's not like he hasn't fulfilled his other campaign pledges. I think he's, in terms of a politician who's campaigned on something and delivered, he's done a lot more than most. So I think the base, well, obviously Ann Coulter's not happy, and those two have got, it's got personal between them now. But I think in terms of the majority of people who voted for Trump don't necessarily think like Ann Coulter, however impressive she may be as a human being.
Well, I mean, she was at the roast for Rob Lowe,
Yes.
and so she's got a lot of cred there. But let me ask you this: on 60 Minutes, Andrew McCabe was on the other night, and I love the fact that you've got McCabe and Comey pointing fingers at each other. It's always great when you have the guys that you trust in the FBI and the Justice Department pointing fingers at each other as this whole thing, including the Mueller investigation, blows up. That was a question, actually.
Sorry, what was the question? I didn't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because he didn't have one.
I didn't put a question mark at the end of it.
Well, let's play. No, here's part of that interview and the discussion about how the 25th Amendment came about.
The discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
Rosenstein was actually openly talking about whether there was a majority of the cabinet who would vote to remove the president.
That's correct. Counting votes or possible votes.
What seemed to be coursing through the mind of the Deputy Attorney General was getting rid of the President of the United States.
Well,
one way or another.
I can't confirm that, but what I can say is the Deputy Attorney General was definitely very concerned about the President, about his capacity, and about his intent at that point in time.
And Freddie, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, he completely tells a different side to this story, that no, they did not do what McCabe said, correct?
Well, it's all so murky, isn't it? But the truth is there was undoubtedly a failed coup of some sort. There's been several sort of failed coup attempts on Trump. And, I think what you have here is the winding up of a very, very exhausting story that's taken up so much media attention for the last couple of years. And we're probably going to be replacing it with an even more boring and exhausting story, which will be the Wall saga.
Actually, Andy McCarthy made an interesting point after having watched the interview. As great as Scott Pelley sounds when he asks these questions, he did ask McCabe about Russia, but he failed to ask what Trump really wanted. And what Trump wanted was for it to become public what Comey had told him privately, which was that Trump supposedly wasn't the subject of the Russian probe, even though Comey was lying because he was the subject of the Russian probe. Am I right about that, Freddie Gray?
Yeah, I think you are right. I think Trump has consistently wanted the truth to come out on this because the truth is actually more favorable to him than it is to his enemies.
No. And hopefully the Mueller investigation will wrap up anytime soon, maybe in my lifetime, Freddie?
Let's hope so. I've been hoping it's going to wrap up for the last 4 months, and people in Washington have told me that it's wrapping up, but it just seems to sort of linger on.
All right. Freddie Gray, thank you so much for joining us. Freddie Gray is the deputy editor of The Spectator, former literary editor of The American Conservative, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.